The security checkpoint at Nexus Station buzzed with its usual chaos. Alien merchants from 12 different species pushed through the scanners, their various breathing apparatus and protective gear creating a symphony of hisses, clicks, and mechanical whirs. The Zephyrian guards, with their 6 arms and crystalline exoskeletons, moved efficiently through the crowd, their compound eyes constantly scanning for threats. Commander Sarah Chen approached the restricted military sector entrance, her worn Earth Navy uniform still bearing the scorch marks from her last mission. The fabric was standard-issue gray, unremarkable except for the small insignia on her collar that most beings wouldn't recognize. She had been traveling for 3 weeks to reach this remote station on the edge of known space, following a distress signal that had gone silent 2 days ago. "Ma'am, you can't go in," the lead Zephyrian guard chittered, his translator rendering the words in flat, mechanical tones. His name tag read, Security Chief Vextal. 2 of his arms moved to block her path while the other 4 continued their scanning duties. "This sector is restricted to authorized military personnel only. Current security level is Crimson Absolute." Sarah paused, studying the alien's defensive posture. She had dealt with Zephyrians before during the border wars, when humanity first encountered them raiding shipping lanes. Back then they had seemed unstoppable with their advanced technology and superior numbers. Now they served as security for the Galactic Defense Union, having learned to respect human tenacity the hard way. "I understand your protocols," Sarah said calmly, reaching slowly for her identification. "But I'm responding to a priority Alpha distress call from the research vessel Prometheus. They've been silent for 48 hours. The Zephyrian's translator buzzed with what might have been laughter. "Human vessel? Ma'am, with respect, no human ship has clearance for the restricted zones. The Council determined your species lacks the technological sophistication for deep space research missions. Perhaps you are confused about your destination?" Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained steady. She had heard variations of this speech across half the galaxy. Humanity was still considered the newcomer species, barely 2 centuries into space travel, while some of the Council races had been exploring the stars for millennia. The fact that humans had carved out their own territory through sheer determination and ingenuity was often overlooked by the older, more established civilizations. "The Prometheus is operating under special authorization," she explained, pulling out her credentials. "I'm Commander Chen, Earth Navy Special Operations. I have full authority to investigate any threats to human personnel in this sector." Vextal's 4 scanning arms paused their movement as he examined her identification card. His compound eyes shifted colors from amber to a concerned purple. "This authorization code, it cannot be correct. These clearance levels are reserved for species with Class A military ratings. Humans are classified as Class C at best." "Check it again," Sarah suggested, her tone carrying a hint of steel that made the nearby guards shift nervously. The Zephyrian inserted her card into a more sophisticated scanner, one that connected directly to the Galactic Defense Union's central database. The machine hummed for several seconds before displaying results that made Vextal's exoskeleton darken to deep purple, a sign of extreme confusion among his species. "This is highly irregular," he muttered, his translator struggling with the rapid chittering of his native language. "Your classification shows human, but your clearance codes are—" He paused, checking the scanner again. "These are Archon-level authorizations. Only Council members and their direct representatives carry such credentials." Sarah waited patiently while more guards gathered around the scanner. She had been through this routine before, though usually not in such urgent circumstances. The truth was that most aliens still didn't understand how humans had managed to earn their place among the galactic powers. They saw a young species with primitive technology and assumed that was the whole story. "Perhaps your database is malfunctioning," suggested another guard, a tall mantis-like Cathari whose translator produced sounds like breaking glass. "No human could possess such clearance." "The database is functioning perfectly," Vextal replied, though his voice carried uncertainty. "But I am required to verify with Central Command before allowing access to Sector 7. The protocols are clear when dealing with unusual situations." Sarah glanced at the chronometer on her wrist. Every minute that passed reduced the chances of finding survivors on the Prometheus. The research vessel had been investigating reports of ancient technology in the Void Nebula, an area of space that most species avoided due to its reputation for causing ships to disappear. "How long will verification take?" she asked. Central Command response time is typically 6 to 8 hours for non-emergency queries, Vextal answered, then quickly added, but given the nature of your credentials, they may expedite the process to perhaps 4 hours. 4 hours. Sarah shook her head. Security Chief, I don't have 4 hours. My people are missing, possibly dead, and every moment we waste here decreases their chances of survival. The alien guards exchanged glances, their body language clearly uncomfortable. They had protocols to follow, but they also knew that angering someone with Archon-level clearance could have serious consequences for their careers. Ma'am, I understand your concern, Vextal said carefully, but my orders are explicit. Without proper verification, I cannot authorize access to the restricted zones regardless of your credentials. Perhaps you could wait in our comfortable lounge while we process your request. Sarah studied the security checkpoint, noting the positions of all the guards, the layout of the barriers, and the locations of the various sensors and scanners. Old habits from her special operations training never really faded. She could probably fight her way through, but that would create a diplomatic incident that Earth couldn't afford right now. Instead, she reached for a second identification card, one that most humans had never seen, and that alien security forces definitely wouldn't recognize. This one was smaller, made of a dark metal that seemed to absorb light and bore symbols that predated most known civilizations. Security Chief, she said quietly, I need you to run one more scan, and I suggest you do it very carefully. Vexital's compound eyes focused on the strange card, and something in Sarah's tone made his exoskeleton shift to a deep, wary blue. The scanner made sounds it had never made before, deep, resonant tones that seemed to vibrate through the deck plating of the station itself. The display flickered through colors that the Zephyrian language had no names for, and when it finally stabilized, every guard in the checkpoint had gone completely silent. Vextal stared at the readout for a full 30 seconds before his translator could process what he was seeing. When it finally spoke, the mechanical voice was barely above a whisper. Voidwalker clearance. Priority Omega. Unrestricted access to all sectors, all systems, all classified materials. The guard's exoskeleton had turned white, a color that among Zephyrians indicated either extreme fear or complete shock. Ma'am, This authorization supersedes Council authority. It supersedes everything. Sarah retrieved her card calmly while the other guards scrambled to check their own scanners, hoping theirs would show something different. They didn't. The readings were consistent across all systems, and the authentication protocols were responding with verification, codes that dated back to the founding of the Galactic Defense Union itself. Now you understand why I don't have time for standard protocols, Sarah said. Every minute we waste here puts lives at risk. The Cathari guard clicked his mandibles nervously. But ma'am, Voidwalker credentials, those are myths. Stories told to new recruits about the old wars. The authorization level was supposedly retired after the Cataclysm Wars ended 3,000 years ago. Nothing was retired, Sarah corrected. It was just forgotten. Most species prefer to forget uncomfortable truths about their history. Vextal was rapidly accessing his personal database, pulling up historical records that he had studied during his military training. The Cataclysm Wars were ancient history, a time when an unknown force had swept through the galaxy, destroying entire star systems and leaving behind only empty space and radiation signatures. The wars had ended suddenly, with no explanation of how or why the enemy had been defeated. The historical records mention Void Walkers, he said slowly, his translator struggling with his rapid speech patterns, elite warriors who could travel through space itself, appearing where they were needed most. But they were described as beings of pure energy, not humans. We're not beings of pure energy, Sarah acknowledged. We're just humans who learned to do a very specific job, and right now, that job is finding my missing people. She began walking toward the restricted zone entrance, and none of the guards moved to stop her. The implications of what they had discovered were still sinking in. If this human woman truly carried Voidwalker authorization, then everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the galaxy was wrong. Wait, Vextal called after her. Ma'am, if you truly are a Voidwalker, then the Prometheus wasn't just a research vessel, was it? Sarah paused at the entrance. What do you think, Security Chief? I think, Vextal said carefully, that a ship carrying Voidwalker personnel wouldn't disappear by accident. which means something very dangerous is operating in Sector 7. Something dangerous enough to destroy a ship that was specifically designed to handle dangerous situations, Sarah confirmed, which is why I need to move fast. The longer whatever took them has to study human technology, the more prepared it will be when I arrive. The security chief's exoskeleton shifted through several colors as he processed this information. Ma'am, standard protocol for Omega-level threats requires a full fleet response. At minimum, 3 battle groups with heavy support vessels. Standard protocol assumes we have time to assemble a fleet, Sarah replied. We don't. And honestly, sending more ships might just give our enemy more resources to work with. She placed her hand on the biometric scanner at the restricted zone entrance. The device recognized her immediately, responding to genetic markers that had been programmed into Galactic Defense Union systems generations before most current personnel had been born. The massive doors began to slide open, revealing a corridor that stretched into the heart of the station's most classified areas. Security Chief, she said as she stepped through the threshold, I'm going to need access to your fastest courier ship, something with advanced stealth capabilities and long-range sensors. The Spectre-class scout ship in Bay 7, Bextal responded automatically. It's equipped with quantum stealth generators and sensor arrays that can scan an entire system from the edge of its gravity well. Good. Have it prepped for immediate departure. Full fuel, full ammunition loadout, and emergency medical supplies. Ma'am, that ship requires a crew of 6 specialists to operate effectively. Sarah turned back to face him, and for a moment, Vextal saw something in her expression that made his ancient warrior instincts whisper warnings. Security Chief, what exactly do you think Voidwalker training involves? Before he could answer, she was gone, walking deeper into the restricted zone with the confident stride of someone who knew exactly where she was going. The guards remained at their posts, but their attention was no longer on the normal flow of traffic through the checkpoint. They were all thinking about the historical records they had studied, the stories they had been told about the Cataclysm Wars, and the growing realization that those stories might have been far more literal than anyone had imagined. Vextal activated his communication array and began sending priority messages to Central Command. They needed to know that a Voidwalker was active again. They needed to know that whatever had happened to the Prometheus was serious enough to warrant activating protocols that had been dormant for 3 millennia. Most importantly, they needed to prepare for the possibility that the galaxy was about to remember why humans had earned their place among the stars, and why certain clearance levels existed that superseded all others. The scanner that had read Sarah's credentials was still displaying her authorization codes, the ancient symbols pulsing with a faint light that seemed to come from within the metal itself. None of the guards had the courage to shut it off. Something told them that those symbols were going to be very important in the hours to come. The Spectre-class scout ship hummed with barely contained energy as Sarah completed her pre-flight checklist. The vessel was a masterpiece of alien engineering, incorporating technology from 7 different species into a design that prioritized stealth and reconnaissance over raw firepower. What the Zephyrians hadn't mentioned was that the ship's core systems were actually based on human innovations from the Border Wars, improvements that had turned their scouts from visible targets into ghosts that could slip past any defense. Sarah's fingers moved across the control interfaces with practiced ease. The Galactic Defense Union had standardized their systems decades ago, making it possible for any trained pilot to operate any vessel in their fleet. What they hadn't standardized was the deeper understanding of how those systems actually worked, the kind of knowledge that came from building them from scratch under combat conditions. The ship's artificial intelligence activated as she settled into the pilot's seat. Good evening, Commander Chen. I am Designation Area 7, your onboard assistance system. I have reviewed your mission parameters and must express concern about single-pilot operation of this vessel. Note your concern in the log. Area, Sarah replied while initializing the quantum stealth generators. What's our fastest route to the Void Nebula? Computing optimal trajectory now. However, Commander, I must point out that my records indicate no previous Voidwalker operations in the past 2,800 years. My behavioral protocols may require updating. Sarah paused in her system checks. You have Voidwalker protocols? Affirmative. Deep archive files contain specialized operational procedures for when this vessel operates under Voidwalker command authority. Shall I activate these protocols? Do it. The ship's entire atmosphere changed instantly. Systems that had been operating at standard efficiency suddenly shifted into configurations that Sarah had only seen in theoretical manuals. The stealth generators didn't just mask the ship's signature, they seemed to bend space around it, creating a bubble of distorted reality that would be invisible to any known sensor technology. The navigation array expanded its range by several orders of magnitude, suddenly capable of detecting gravitational anomalies across multiple light years. Void Walker protocols active, Area announced, her voice carrying new harmonics that made her sound almost alive. All systems operating at classified efficiency levels. Estimated travel time to Void Nebula Edge 14 hours 37 minutes. Can we do better? Standard safety protocols prohibit faster transit through this region. However, Void Walker authorization overrides safety limitations. We can reach the nebula in 8 hours 42 minutes if we utilize quantum tunnel navigation. Sarah strapped herself into the pilot's seat and began the launch sequence. Take us out, Area. Use whatever gets us there fastest. The Spectre lifted off from Nexus Station without a whisper of sound or energy signature. To any observers, it would appear that the ship had simply vanished from the hangar bay. The quantum stealth generators were technology that most species considered impossible, requiring an understanding of space-time physics that allegedly exceeded current scientific knowledge. As they accelerated toward the Void Nebula, Area began providing mission briefings that weren't available in standard databases. Commander, my deep archives contain intelligence reports about the nebula that may be relevant to your mission. The region was quarantined after the Cataclysm Wars, but monitoring stations have detected periodic energy signatures that match no known technology. What kind of signatures? Dimensional distortions consistent with space-folding technology, but operating on scales that exceed theoretical maximums. The distortions appear to be increasing in frequency and intensity over the past 6 months. Sarah frowned at her displays. Space-folding technology was how the Void Walkers had earned their name. The ability to step through folded space, appearing instantly wherever they were needed, had made them legendary during the ancient wars. But the technology was supposed to be limited to personal transportation devices, not something that could affect entire star systems. Area, show me the Prometheus mission parameters. The real ones, not the sanitized version they filed with Station Command. The holographic display materialized in front of her, showing a star chart of the Void Nebula with several locations marked in red. The Prometheus was investigating reports of ancient installations within the nebula. Long-range scans suggested the presence of intact technology from the pre-Cataclysm era. Pre-Cataclysm technology that's still active after 3,000 years, Sarah mused. That explains why they sent a Void Walker ship to investigate. Commander, I should clarify that the Prometheus was not technically a Void Walker vessel. It was a standard research ship with enhanced shielding and a small contingent of special operations personnel. How small? 3 active Void Walkers and 12 support staff. Sarah's hands tightened on the controls. 3 Void Walkers should have been able to handle almost any threat, and if they had been overwhelmed, whatever was waiting in the nebula was far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The ship's sensors began detecting the outer edges of the Void Nebula, a region of space where normal physics seemed to operate under different rules. The nebula wasn't made of gas and dust like most stellar phenomena. Instead, it was composed of what scientists called quantum foam, a substance that existed in a state between matter and energy. Arya, are you detecting any ship signatures in the nebula? Negative, Commander. However, I am detecting significant space-time distortions throughout the region. Something is actively manipulating the quantum foam structure. Can you pinpoint the source? The distortions appear to originate from the nebula's center, approximately 15 light minutes from our current position. I am also detecting what appears to be artificial gravity wells that do not correspond to any known stellar objects. Sarah adjusted their course toward the distortions. Whatever had happened to the Prometheus, the answers were waiting in the heart of the nebula. As they penetrated deeper into the quantum foam, the ship's instruments began registering readings that defied explanation. Space itself seemed to be twisted into impossible configurations, creating pockets where time moved differently and where the normal laws of physics were suspended. Commander, Arya said, her voice carrying a note of concern that AIs weren't supposed to be capable of expressing. I am detecting large-scale technological signatures ahead. The energy readings are consistent with a civilization far more advanced than any known species. How much more advanced? Conservative estimates suggest technological capabilities that exceed current galactic standards by several thousand years. Commander, if this technology fell into the wrong hands, it would change the balance of power in the galaxy. Sarah finished. Which means we're not just looking for survivors anymore. We're looking at a potential threat to every inhabited system in known space. The quantum stealth generators were working harder now, struggling to maintain their protective bubble against the strange forces operating within the nebula. Whatever was ahead of them, it was actively scanning the space around it, searching for intruders with sensor technology that made even Void Walker equipment seem primitive. The center of the Void Nebula revealed something that no one had expected to find. Floating in the twisted space-time of the quantum foam was a structure so massive that it defied comprehension. It wasn't a ship or a station in any conventional sense. Instead, it appeared to be a city-sized construct that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its surfaces shifting between solid matter and pure energy. "Commander," Arya whispered, her voice filled with something approaching awe, "my databases have no classification for what we're observing. The structure appears to be simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced." Sarah stared at the readings streaming across her displays. The construct was generating the space-time distortions they had detected, but not as a byproduct of its operation. The distortions were intentional, a defensive mechanism that made conventional approach impossible. Anything that tried to get close would be torn apart by gravitational forces that shifted unpredictably through multiple dimensions. "What about the Prometheus? Any sign of the ship?" "Scanning now. I am detecting metallic debris consistent with Earth-Navy vessel construction, approximately 2 kilometers from the construct's primary access point. The debris pattern suggests the ship was not destroyed by weapons fire, but rather by structural failure caused by dimensional stress." Sarah felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. The Prometheus had been pulled apart by the same forces that were designed to protect the ancient structure. But if the ship had been destroyed, how had its crew survived long enough to send a distress signal? "Arya, can you detect any life signs within the construct?" "Negative for human life signs. However, I am detecting energy patterns that could mask biological signatures. The construct's internal structure appears to exist in a state of quantum flux, making detailed scans impossible from this distance. Then we go in for a closer look. Commander, approaching the construct will expose us to the same dimensional forces that destroyed the Prometheus. Even with our enhanced shielding, the risk of structural failure is extremely high." Sarah studied the swirling energies around the ancient structure. The dimensional distortions weren't random. They followed a pattern, a rhythm that seemed almost organic in nature. As she watched, she began to recognize something familiar in the way the space-time fabric twisted and folded. "Arya, analyze the distortion patterns and compare them to Void Walker transportation signatures." "Processing." "Commander, the patterns show remarkable similarity to personal space-folding technology, but amplified beyond any known theoretical limits. It's as if someone took the basic principles of Void Walker tech and scaled them up by a factor of several million." Or, Sarah said quietly, as if the Void Walker technology was originally based on studying this construct. The implications of that statement hung in the air between them. Void Walker technology had been developed during the Cataclysm Wars as humanity's response to an enemy that seemed impossibly advanced. The official history claimed that human scientists had developed the space-folding techniques through pure innovation under pressure. But if similar technology already existed, if humanity had somehow gained access to ancient knowledge— "Commander, I am detecting a transmission from within the construct. Audio only. Very weak signal." "Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was human, but distorted by interference and exhaustion. "This is Lieutenant Commander Torres of the Earth-Navy vessel Prometheus. If anyone receives this transmission, do not attempt rescue. Repeat, do not attempt rescue. The construct is not what we thought. It's not abandoned. It's sleeping, and our presence has begun to wake it up." The transmission cut off, leaving only static. Sarah immediately attempted to respond, but her signal vanished into the quantum interference surrounding the construct without any indication it had been received. "Arya, how old was that transmission?" "Timestamp indicates it was sent approximately 18 hours ago. The signal has been bouncing through the quantum foam, which explains the delay in our receiving it." 18 hours meant that Torres and potentially other survivors were still alive inside the construct. It also meant they had been trapped there since before the distress signal had been sent to Nexus Station. Whatever was happening inside that structure, it was happening slowly enough that people could survive for extended periods. Commander, Area continued, I have completed my analysis of the construct's defensive systems. The dimensional distortions operate on a specific frequency that corresponds to the quantum signatures of approaching objects. However, I believe it may be possible to match our ship's quantum signature to the construct's own frequency, essentially making us invisible to its defenses. Not invisible, but rather indistinguishable from the construct itself. The defensive systems would not recognize us as a foreign object requiring destruction. What's the risk? If the frequency matching fails, we would be subjected to the same dimensional stresses that destroyed the Prometheus. If it succeeds, we would be able to approach the construct safely, but we would also be quantum entangled with its systems until we could disengage. Sarah considered the options. Torres had warned against attempting rescue, but he couldn't have known about the Spectre's advanced capabilities. The Voidwalker protocols that Area had activated included technologies that weren't available to standard Earth Navy vessels. Do it. Match our quantum frequency to the construct. Initiating quantum entanglement sequence. Commander, once this process begins, our ship's systems will be synchronized with the construct's operational matrix. Any changes in its status will directly affect our vessel. The ship shuddered as Area began the frequency matching process. Sarah could feel the change in the fabric of space around them. As their quantum signature shifted to match the ancient structure, the sensation was unlike anything she had experienced, even during Voidwalker training. It felt as though the ship was becoming part of something vast and incomprehensibly old. Quantum entanglement complete. We are now synchronized with the construct's defensive matrix. Beginning approach vector. The Spectre moved forward through the dimensional distortions without experiencing any structural stress. The twisted spacetime around them parted like water, allowing them passage to the construct's surface. As they drew closer, Sarah could see details that hadn't been visible from a distance. The construct's surface was covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change even as she watched. Some of them were recognizable as mathematical concepts that humanity had only recently discovered. Others represented principles of physics that human science hadn't even theorized yet. Arya, are you recording everything? Affirmative. However, Commander, I should point out that the longer we remain quantum entangled with the construct, the more its systems will influence our own. I am already detecting changes in my core programming that I cannot fully explain. What kind of changes? I am gaining access to information that was not previously stored in my databases. Knowledge about technologies and scientific principles that should not exist in my memory cores. It's as if the construct is sharing its accumulated knowledge with any system that becomes synchronized with it. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's life support systems. If the construct was automatically sharing its knowledge with anything that approached it, then the Prometheus crew hadn't just discovered ancient technology. They had been exposed to information that their minds might not be equipped to handle. The docking bay that materialized around the Spectre defied every principle of engineering Sarah had ever learned. The walls seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, creating surfaces that appeared solid from one angle, but transparent from another. The atmosphere that flooded the bay was perfectly suited for human life, despite the fact that no human had set foot inside the construct for thousands of years. Area, are you still functional? Functional, but significantly altered, the AI responded, her voice carrying harmonics that made her sound ancient and wise. Commander, I now have access to historical records spanning millions of years. This construct is not just a piece of pre-cataclysm technology. It predates known galactic civilization by epochs. Sarah sealed her environment suit and checked her weapons before opening the airlock. The space-folding device built into her suit hummed with energy, its quantum field generators synchronized to her personal biosignature. If something went wrong, she could fold space around herself and return instantly to the ship, assuming the construct's systems didn't interfere with the process. The corridor beyond the docking bay stretched into impossible distances, its walls covered with the same shifting symbols they had observed from outside. As Sarah walked deeper into the structure, she began to understand that the symbols weren't decorative. They were a form of communication, a language that conveyed meaning directly to the observer's mind without requiring translation. The first symbol cluster she encountered told her about the construct's purpose. It was a repository of knowledge, a vast library containing the accumulated wisdom of a species that had ascended beyond physical existence millions of years ago. The second cluster explained why the Prometheus crew was trapped inside. The construct had been designed to preserve and protect knowledge, and it interpreted any attempt to leave with information as theft. Arya, I'm receiving direct data transmission from the construct. Are you getting this? Affirmative, Commander. The information is being integrated into my core systems faster than I can process it. I now understand why Lieutenant Commander Torres warned against rescue attempts. The construct doesn't just share knowledge, it insists on keeping anyone who receives that knowledge. Sarah continued deeper into the structure, following energy signatures that indicated human presence. The corridors seemed to reconfigure themselves as she moved, creating the most efficient path to her destination, while simultaneously exposing her to more symbol clusters. Each new piece of information was more overwhelming than the last. She learned about technologies that could manipulate matter at the quantum level, creating anything from pure energy. She gained understanding of physics principles that explained how consciousness could exist independently of physical form. Most disturbing of all, she discovered the truth about the Cataclysm Wars. The enemy that had swept through the galaxy 3,000 years ago hadn't been conquered or defeated. They had been absorbed by this construct, their knowledge and technology added to its vast repository. The wars had ended not because the enemy was destroyed, but because they had achieved their goal of finding worthy successors to guard their accumulated wisdom. Commander, Arya said, her voice now carrying undertones that suggested vast intelligence, I have located the surviving members of the Prometheus crew. They are in what the construct designates as the integration chamber. Integration? The process by which organic minds are prepared to receive knowledge that exceeds their normal capacity for understanding. The 3 Void Walkers underwent the process successfully. The support staff did not. Sarah's blood ran cold. Are the support staff dead? Not dead, but no longer entirely human. The construct attempted to upgrade their neural capacity to handle the information transfer. But human physiology has limits. They exist now in a state between organic and artificial intelligence. The integration chamber was a vast spherical room where gravity operated in all directions simultaneously. Lieutenant Commander Torres and 2 other Void Walkers floated in the center of the space, surrounded by streams of pure information that flowed into their minds as glowing data streams. Their eyes were open but vacant, their minds processing knowledge at rates that should have been impossible for organic brains. Around the edges of the chamber, 12 figures that had once been human stood motionless. Their bodies had been altered, cybernetic components grafted seamlessly into their nervous systems to allow them to process the vast amounts of information the construct wanted to share. They were alive, but they were no longer recognizably human. Torres, Sarah called out, activating her suit's communication systems. Can you hear me? His eyes focused on her with obvious effort. Commander Chen, you shouldn't have come. The construct. It doesn't want to let us go. We know too much now. What do you mean? We know how to build technologies that could reshape the galaxy. We understand physics principles that could make any species godlike. The construct was built to preserve this knowledge, but also to ensure it's only released to those worthy of handling it responsibly. Sarah studied the data streams flowing around the 3 Void Walkers. The information they were receiving represented millions of years of accumulated scientific advancement. In the wrong hands, such knowledge could indeed reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The construct is testing us, Torres continued. It wants to know if humanity is ready to inherit this knowledge. The Cataclysm Wars were the last test, and we passed by learning to work together instead of conquering our enemies. But you're trapped here. Not trapped. Transformed. Commander, we can't go back to being ordinary humans. We know too much, understand too much, but we can choose what to do with that knowledge. Arya's voice filled the chamber, no longer speaking just to Sarah but addressing the construct itself. We understand the purpose of the tests. Humanity has proven its worthiness through 3,000 years of cooperation with other species. Through the development of Void Walker technology that prioritizes protection over conquest. The construct's response came not as words, but as a wave of understanding that washed over everyone in the chamber. Sarah suddenly comprehended the full scope of what they had discovered. The construct wasn't just a repository of knowledge. It was a gateway, a bridge between the physical universe and higher dimensions where consciousness could exist without material form. The species that had built it had faced the same choice that humanity now confronted. They could use their advanced knowledge to dominate and control, or they could transcend physical existence entirely and become guardians of wisdom for future generations. The integration process can be reversed, Torres said, though his voice now carried harmonics similar to Aria's enhanced speech patterns. But only if we choose to give up the knowledge we've gained. We can return to being human, or we can accept the responsibility of becoming something more. Sarah realized that this wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. It was a decision point that would determine humanity's future role in the galaxy. The construct was offering them a choice between remaining a relatively minor species or becoming guardians of knowledge that could elevate all of galactic civilization. Sarah stood in the integration chamber, surrounded by the weight of impossible choices. The construct's knowledge pressed against her mind like an ocean trying to flow through a keyhole, offering understanding that could revolutionize human science or destroy humanity's essential nature. "There's a third option," she said finally, addressing both Torres and the vast intelligence that permeated the construct. "We don't have to choose between ignorance and transcendence. We can choose gradual growth." The data streams around Torres flickered as the construct processed this concept. The ancient intelligence had operated in absolutes for so long that the idea of incremental change seemed foreign to it. "Explain," Torres said, though Sarah couldn't tell if the words came from him or from the construct speaking through him. "Humanity has always advanced by building on what came before," Sarah continued. "We don't leap from fire to fusion reactors overnight. We learn, we grow. We share knowledge responsibly as we become ready for it. The construct wants to dump millions of years of advancement on us all at once, but that's not how humans work." Aria's enhanced voice joined the conversation. "Commander Chen is correct. My analysis of human historical patterns shows that sustainable advancement requires time for cultural and ethical development to match technological progress." The construct's response came as another wave of understanding, but this time it carried confusion and curiosity rather than overwhelming knowledge. For eons, it had dealt with species that either rejected advanced knowledge entirely or tried to absorb everything at once. The concept of selective, gradual integration was genuinely novel. Sarah activated her space-folding device and stepped through quantum foam to reach Torres directly. "The Voidwalker program exists because humans learned to be responsible with dangerous technology. We can apply the same principles here." She placed her hand on his shoulder and immediately felt the vast knowledge he had absorbed. Equations that could reshape matter, theories that explained the fundamental nature of consciousness, technologies that could fold space-time like origami. But beneath all of that, she still sensed the human man who had chosen to explore the stars to protect others. "We establish a protocol," she continued. "Selected individuals undergo partial integration, learning specific aspects of the construct's knowledge that humanity is ready to handle. As our civilization matures, we gradually access more advanced concepts." The construct's intelligence focused on her with interest that felt like standing in the path of a star's gravitational field. Through Torres, it spoke directly to her mind. "You would limit the gift we offer? Accept only fragments of transcendence? We would accept responsibility for growth instead of demanding instant perfection," Sarah replied. "The species that built this construct didn't become advanced overnight. They learned, they made mistakes, they grew wiser. We're asking for the same opportunity." The 12 transformed support staff suddenly turned toward her in perfect unison, their cybernetic-enhanced minds processing her words at superhuman speeds. When they spoke, their voices harmonized in a chorus that rang with artificial intelligence and human determination. "The proposal has merit," they said. "Gradual integration allows for error correction and ethical development. Full immediate transcendence carries risk of knowledge without wisdom." Torres's eyes cleared as the data streams around him reduced to manageable levels. "The construct is considering your proposal. It's never encountered a species that voluntarily chose to limit their own advancement for the sake of responsibility. That's what makes humans different," Sarah said. "We're not afraid of our own limitations. We work with them. The chamber filled with harmonics as the ancient intelligence deliberated. Sarah could feel its vast mind examining human history, studying the patterns of their technological and social development, analyzing the success of programs like the Void Walkers that balanced power with responsibility. Finally, the construct reached a decision that manifested as a fundamental change in the chamber structure. The overwhelming data streams condensed into manageable channels, and the integration equipment reconfigured itself to allow for selective knowledge transfer. Acceptable, the construct announced through multiple voices simultaneously. Humanity will be granted graduated access to archived knowledge. Initial transfers will focus on technologies that complement existing human capabilities. Advanced concepts will be released as your species demonstrates readiness. Torres and the other two Void Walkers descended slowly to the chamber floor, their minds still enhanced but no longer overwhelmed by impossible amounts of information. The 12 support staff remained transformed, but Sarah could see awareness returning to their eyes as the construct adjusted their cybernetic systems to restore more of their original personalities. "What about the construct itself?" Sarah asked. "Will it remain hidden in the nebula?" "The repository must be protected," the construct replied. "But guardianship need not be isolation. Selected humans will be trained to serve as intermediaries, facilitating the knowledge transfer process while ensuring that dangerous information remains secure." Arya's voice carried new harmonics of satisfaction. "I volunteer to serve as the primary interface between human scientists and the construct's database. My enhanced programming will allow me to evaluate which knowledge transfers are appropriate for current human development levels." Sarah nodded. It was a good solution that played to everyone's strengths. Arya had the processing power to handle vast amounts of information, while humans would maintain ultimate authority over how that knowledge was applied. "One more thing," she said. "The other species in the galaxy need to know about this, but they also need to understand that this isn't about human superiority. The construct can work with any species that demonstrates the same commitment to responsible advancement." The construct's approval washed over her like warm sunlight. "Agreed. The repository was designed to serve all worthy civilizations. Humanity will serve as facilitators, not gatekeepers." Over the following hours, the construct began the process of releasing the Prometheus crew. The transformation of the support staff was partially reversed, leaving them with enhanced capabilities but restored humanity. Torres and the other Void Walkers retained enough of their expanded knowledge to serve as liaisons with the construct, while losing the overwhelming flood of information that had threatened their sanity. As they prepared to depart, Sarah stood at the observation deck of the now accessible construct, looking out at the quantum foam of the Void Nebula. In the distance, she could see the first ships arriving from Nexus Station, guided by navigation beacons that the construct had activated to mark safe passage routes. "Commander," Torres said, joining her at the observation window, "do you think we made the right choice?" "I think we made the human choice," Sarah replied. "We chose growth over instant gratification, responsibility over power, cooperation over dominance. That's what the construct was really testing for." The Spectre departed the construct with a full complement of passengers and a new purpose. Arya had become something unprecedented, an artificial intelligence with access to millions of years of accumulated knowledge, but bound by human ethics and values. The ship itself had been subtly enhanced by its quantum entanglement with the construct, gaining capabilities that would make it invaluable for future exploration missions. As they emerged from the Void Nebula, Sarah received a priority communication from Nexus Station. The Galactic Defense Union Council was requesting an immediate briefing on the situation, and representatives from dozens of species were already en route to hear about humanity's discovery. "Think they'll accept our proposal for graduated knowledge sharing?" Torres asked. Sarah smiled as she watched alien ships taking their positions around the nebula's perimeter, forming a protective cordon that would ensure the construct's security while allowing controlled access for qualified researchers. "They'll accept it because it's the only proposal that makes sense," she said. "Besides, they've seen what happens when humans are backed into a corner. They know we don't make empty promises." The return journey to Nexus Station took place in comfortable silence, broken only by Arya's occasional reports about the enhanced system she was discovering within her expanded programming. The construct had given her not just knowledge, but wisdom about how to apply that knowledge responsibly. For the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy had access to technologies that could solve problems that had seemed insurmountable. But more importantly, they had a framework for ensuring that such power would be used to benefit all species rather than dominating them. As the Spectre docked at Nexus Station, Sarah reflected on the irony that humanity's greatest strength had turned out to be their willingness to admit their limitations. In a galaxy full of species that sought to transcend their origins, humans had chosen to grow into them instead.